Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Hit the Green podcast. We got another week of golf ahead of us. I feel like not burnt out, but certainly this last event was the least exciting for me, and maybe that's just because of the finish we saw. Wasn't as exciting a player going to the win, and wasn't as exciting of a finish as we've seen over the last few weeks. So congratulations first and foremost to Michael Thompson. Big win for him. I know, since COVID, he and his family, he and his wife had adopted a couple of kids. He's been really enjoying the time at home, spending time with those kids. And it's really cool to see him pay it off with a win and be able to wave to those kids at the camera there on the 18th green after he finished his round. So not to take anything away from Michael Thompson, it was a phenomenal performance from him, but we had a not so great week again in Draftkings, even though we nailed some of our plays. And on top of that, the event just, I don't know, wasn't necessarily my cup of tea in comparison to the events we've seen since the tour's been back. So still great that we had golf, right? If you're following the MLB at all, looks like we can't take sports for granted right now. We're not entirely sure how much longer they'll be around. It'll be interesting to see if the NFL gets to kick off as scheduled. The NBA is right around the corner here, scheduled to start on Thursday. So it'll be interesting to see how these other sports handle their return post-COVID, or I guess still during COVID. But just saying, let's not take the PGA Tour for granted right now. Even myself feeling maybe a little more burnt out now that we've had these events week in, week out for the last 5 weeks or so. Still don't want to take it for granted. And all in all, it was a great event there in Minnesota, just outside of Minnesota, just outside of Minneapolis, there in Blaine, Minnesota. The 3M tournament crew did a great job. It was a very fair golf course. We saw another winning score around that minus 20 range. Thompson won at minus 19. So yeah, all in all, a solid event. Not my favorite, but they can all be your favorites, right? Before we go ahead and get into the recap for the 3M, I want to talk to you guys about Thrive Fantasy again. And if any of you guys tried it out, make sure to dip down into the comments and let me know what you thought about the product, because I played again this week for the 3M, and I just told you the event wasn't my favorite, but playing on Thrive was one of the highlights of the event for me. As I mentioned last week, the great thing about Thrive is the props that you're going to select while playing on their platform, they're for players that you're going to be able to watch on the national broadcast. And this just in, the PGA Tour does an awful job with broadcasting. Their partners and what they've set up as far as their cable partners are concerned, it's just awful. Like, it's crazy to me in 2020 that we still can't see just about every shot that's hit on the golf course. It feels like PGA Tour coverage hasn't changed since like the early 90s. It really doesn't feel any different from when I grew up watching golf. It seems like you get the same style vignettes, you get the same style of commentary, the flow of everything seems like it really hasn't changed in decades. So I would like to challenge the PGA Tour to get their shit together and figure out how to broadcast something properly, given that we are now in 2020, and quite honestly, they're just not up to snuff. I mean, it's embarrassing and pathetic that we don't get the lack of coverage that we get as golf fans is embarrassing and pathetic. And the PGA Tour, quite honestly, should be ashamed. And that holds true. I mean, for majors, they get a little bit better, of course, and especially at Augusta, because that golf club is able to put so much money into, revamping the coverage for their events and revamping the applications that we can use on our smartphones for their events and things of that nature. But the PGA Tour in their own right, I'm going to call it like it is. I'm going to call a spade a spade. They've been fucking terrible in helping grow this game and give it the exposure that it deserves, because there are so many great young players in this game, and the game is in a great spot moving toward the future. And the PGA Tour just needs to get their shit together and really start promoting these guys and making sure that we get more visibility to these guys, because man, they're failing the sport. They're failing the sport of golf right now, and I hope that there's some cable television partner or some sort of media partner that steps in to help the PGA Tour figure its shit out, because it's egregious right now. with that vent being over, let's get back to Thrive. Yeah, so again, the highlight of the week was being able to play on Thrive because I can actually see the players that I've picked. I wasn't able to cash this week after being able to cash the week prior, but again, the 3M was a rough event for us. And just the great thing about Thrive is you don't have to do all that research, right? Like I think a very good job of compiling information for you guys, sort of making your decisions easier week in and week out, so you don't have to sift through an entire player pool to come up with your lineups. But on Thrive, it really is as simple as you just go ahead and open up the platform and you have a couple choices amongst 10 props. It's as simple as choosing an over or an under. They're players that you're familiar with. And it takes away that advantage that pros really do have in being able to compile data and do a lot of research and gain that edge over you week in and week out. That's not the case at Thrive as it is at other daily fantasy sites. So I highly recommend, if you are just spending, a few $100s or even less, maybe, $20, $30, $40 a week entering these DFS contests, allocate just a little portion of that to Thrive, maybe 25% of your weekly bankroll. Allocate that to Thrive because you are going to see, a lower level of competition because you aren't going to have all of these pros. And even if you do have these pros playing these contests, they aren't at a market advantage over you based on their research. It's just really the case. So really recommend you go check out the folks at Thrive. They've awarded over $1.3 million in prizes since 2018 and are still awarding today. Really, really cool structure. Check it out once. If you don't like it, you don't have to go back, but I'm willing to bet you do like it. And if you are going to check it out, make sure you go ahead and download them from the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store, or you can play at their website, www.thrivefantasy.com. When you sign up, go ahead and use promo code HTGPOD. That's promo code HTGPOD. And on your first deposit of $20 or more, they'll go ahead and give you a $20 match. So, yeah, absolutely go check out those folks at Thrive Fantasy. Your chances of a return is so much greater at profiting. It's so much greater than playing these other websites where you really are your back's against the wall as a casual DFS player because all of these pros and sharks are just muddying the waters greatly. So yeah, now that we have the Thrive promo done, we can get into the good stuff once again, which is what am I smoking, and then we'll get into the recap of the 3M. So today I'm going to go ahead and smoke White Cloudz OG. The grower is White Cloudz, so this is their proprietary OG strain. It is an indica dominant hybrid. It's testing at 24.56% THC. Yeah, it should be a good smoke. It smelled like oddly floral. I was expecting it being an OG, it to have a little more of that skunky smell, but no, it was a very, very floral sort of scent to it. So I'm really excited to get into this. And you'll notice I'm going to do my little joint trick here. And if you guys haven't tried this yet, try it out, man. Try it out and let me know what you think. It's so simple, man. So simple. So let's spark this up. We'll get into the video. One thing to note for you guys, video is going to be significantly shorter this week. It's because we're at a WGC event, and I'll get into what that means after we smoke and when we get into the event. If I can get this thing to light evenly, then we'll be off and running. And I can't blame the roll. The roll is perfect. The roll is always perfect. There we go. Now we're getting rolling. Okay. So back to 3M. As I mentioned, Michael Thompson won it at -19. I mean, the guy hit the ball like stellar. And he is a great putter by all means. So even though we didn't identify him in our player pool, a guy in hindsight, yes, he has, contended before and even at an event like Honda. which also has a lot of water, similar to what we saw at the 3M at TPC Twin Cities. So in hindsight, yes, course fit was at least decent for Michael Thompson, and he showed why, getting to minus 19 and winning. The course played much more as target golf, so ball striking was extremely important, but not so much distance as we thought it might be. So you saw a lot of guys that are great ball strikers at the top of the leaderboard, but not necessarily known for their distance off the tee. Michael Thompson being one of those players, right? We saw a shitload of balls go into the water this week. Like a shit ton of balls were hit into the water this week. I already mentioned the Honda Classic. That's really what I was reminded of a lot in watching the event this week. And moving forward, I've made a note in our model and a note in my documents that I keep here after doing my write-ups every week, that for next year for the 3M, I'm really going to look at Honda as a comp, as a comparison for a tournament, because there's so much water at these courses that I had targeted the top end as having a lot of win equity, and the water, I think, makes that less so the case. There are big scores waiting for you at TPC Twin Cities if you find the water, similarly to Honda. So definitely something to reevaluate next year. We might be able to take a few more flyers at an event like 3M and even fade people that even though they look like extremely strong plays, with so much water out there, it only takes a water ball or two to lead to a miscut. So that's something to definitely look at moving forward. To recap the Millionaire Maker, the top shelf plays, as I mentioned, we're gonna look to fade maybe some of these top tier players that come to play at the 3M in the future because of the water that's present. But the only top shelf play that came through for us was Tony Finau, who in classic Tony Finau fashion came T3. It was just a bummer of a Sunday for Tony. Couldn't really get anything going. And that's just the case for Finau, Sunday after Sunday. It's phenomenal to me that his only win remains Puerto Rico, which was an opposite field event. So really, Finau hasn't won a standard PGA Tour event yet in his career, and he's just too good of a player for that to be the case. He really needs to figure out what's going on Sunday, and we'll get into this later, but I think this particular Sunday is gonna, from a mental standpoint, a psychological standpoint, it's gonna hurt him even more maybe than his failures in the past have. So it was a great performance from a DraftKings perspective. So the only top shelf play that came through for us, but would love to see Finau finally break through and get that win because he's too good of a player to not have that on his resume. We also got a great finish from Max Homa, who also came T3 like Finau. And as I mentioned, all we needed was some putting and around the green to work for Homa, and it was going to be good for him. And this week, he gained 1.5 strokes with the putter, 2.5 strokes around the green. The ball striking was stellar still. This guy's just hitting the shit out of the golf ball. And finally, the result pays that off with a T3. So hopefully you guys stuck with Homa, as I mentioned we should. And hopefully it paid off for you guys. And maybe you had some balanced builds where you stuffed Homa in and didn't include those guys up at the top. I know I didn't have enough of those lineups, and I wish I did because the SCHWAG bag paid off too. I was heavy on Cam Davis this past week, really touted him hard. Hope you guys followed me on that one because he really came through. And Adam Schenk as well for that price tag. A made cut, a solid finish. Yeah, you will take that at that price tag. So Schenk and Davis, great performances from the SCHWAG bag. Homa was phenomenal for us as well. It was just those top shelf plays that really failed us. All of them missing the cut except for Finau. And luckily we had a fade on Fleetwood anyway. But yeah, moving forward at this event, we'll want to make sure that we keep in mind that the water at this golf course can jump up and grab anybody. And it just takes a couple water balls and you're looking like you're in Tin Cup in the last scene out of Tin Cup for a second there for a guy like Dustin Johnson. If you guys saw his opening round before he withdrew, dumping a couple in the water there and looking like he's from Tin Cup, trying to reach that par 5 and 2. So noted lessons from the 3M for this past week. It'll certainly be better next year. That's the goal here. We're going to improve on the model each and every week and year over year as well at each event. We're going to take our lessons learned and we're going to get better so we can pass that down to you guys and win some money. So hopefully you guys were able to win some money with a balanced build. If you guys did take my top shelf picks, it's likely that you didn't win some money this week, or last week, I should say. But this week, we're going to go ahead and get it back at the WGC FedEx St. Jude Invitational. We're going to go over the course breakdown here in a second. I'm going to get this relit, and it's a WGC, so 78 players, a no-cut event. Our player pool is going to be extremely small this week. That's the reasoning for the short video. So I think I have some really good insights this week. I'm very, very excited again this week. But being that it's a WGC, we get a slightly different look in terms of DraftKings strategy, which has me super excited. So let's spark this up again and get into the St. Jude Invitational breakdown. All right. So we're going to be playing the WGC FedEx St. Jude at TPC Southwind. It's in Memphis, Tennessee. It's a par 70. It's 7,238 yards, and we're playing on Bermuda greens this week. So adjusted for par at 7,238 yards at a par 70, this is a long golf course. It's not short by any means. It's a Ron Pritchard design. Pritchard, most famously known for his ornament restoration, and really just his restorations of Donald Ross designs in general. So we will see off the tee, as with most Donald Ross designs, off the tee and approach are going to appear in our model here. Brooks Koepka, he's your defending champion at -16. Being that it is a par 70, we only have 2 par 5s this week. We have 4 par 3s. The 2 par 5s are number 3 and number 16. Number 3 is going to be reachable by most of the field. Number 16 is going to be in play for all of the field as far as reaching the green in 2. So really, length off the tees, not something we're weighing as heavily this week. But being able to gain strokes off the tee will be important. Being able to find the fairway and gain strokes off the tee in a combination of distance and accuracy, not necessarily just looking for those guys that are going to bomb and gouge. So with the 2 par 5s, we have 4 par 3s, and the one to note is the 14th. It's a about 240 yard par 3 playing over water, so it's an absolute monster. Its average score to par is typically over par year in and year out. So that hole is going to be a monster. If it's something that you want to take a look at, folks who play par 3s, really long par 3s, the par 3s over 230 yards plus really well, it's something you could look at. But given that it's only one hole here, we're not going to include anything like that in our model. Just wanted to mention the hole because it's a really cool golf hole, and it's going to be fun to watch these guys and see what sort of scores they can make on the 14th, being such a long hole over the water. As I mentioned, it's a WGC, which means it's a small event. It's also a no-cut event. So we're going to get 4 rounds from every single player in this field. Typically, people like to read that as a reason to go ahead and grab players at the very bottom of the $6,000 range because they're guaranteed to play 4 rounds, right? They're not going to miss the cut. I would caution you in doing that. Having 4 rounds from a bad golfer, in a lot of respects, is even worse than having 2 rounds from a bad golfer, right? Bad golfers are bad golfers. We need good results relative to the field, regardless. So just because a guy's playing 4 rounds doesn't mean he's viable. And I would caution you to think that just because everyone's getting 4 rounds that, taking some crazy flyer on one of these guys in the very bottom of the 6K range is a good idea. I would not advise that, and I would actually say with how strong this field is, we can build lineups that are plenty strong without having to go down to that range. So I like fading the bottom of the $6,000 range this week. I think there's so many strong players above that range that we can fill out our lineups with that even though every golfer is going to get 4 rounds, I just don't find it necessary. All 4 rounds under 70, so scoring in the 60s for all 4 rounds for DraftKings scoring, going to be pretty big this week. Being that it is a par 70, that's only going to require you to shoot 1 under. So yeah, just keep it in mind. And that goes back to what I mentioned about taking guys at the bottom of the 6K range. These are guys that, have much less of a chance of being able to do something like that, accomplish a feat like that. So just keep in mind, even though all these guys are going to get 4 rounds, you still want to play quality golfers that have a chance at churning out a high upside finish. And part of being able to churn out that high upside finish is being able to shoot 4 rounds under 70 this week, 4 rounds in the 60s this week. So the last thing I want to mention in prepping you for this tournament, as far as the course goes, is weather, something that we haven't talked about in the last couple of weeks just because it hasn't been really prevalent. But this week, it certainly is. We have rain forecasted in the Memphis area Thursday through Sunday, and high chances of it, with storms on Thursday and Friday likely. So weather stacking, a very viable option this week. If you want a weather stack, I would not blame you at all. It could turn out that, we get high winds in an AM wave and low winds in a PM wave, or vice versa. I can't tell you how the weather's going to break, but I will say if you want to create a couple of tee time based stacks, so take 6 players that tee off in the morning on Thursday and 6 players that tee off in the afternoon on Thursday, and build a few builds like that, I think this week is a good week to do something like that, because we could see something very funky happen with the weather where one wave of players are playing a drastically different golf course than the other wave of players are, based on either the rain softening the greens or what the wind conditions look like, or etc. So certainly something that's viable this week. And if you want to go that route, I would not blame you at all. It's something that I will be sprinkling in. I will build a couple weather stacks in both directions just to make sure I have that base covered, because I think the weather for this week warrants that type of build. So what are we looking for around TPC Southwind? What does our model look like? So the main components of our model in order as far as weight are strokes gained off the tee. It has correlated to players that have played well, and particularly last year's leaderboard, players that finished in the top 10. Strokes gained off the tee correlates very heavily. These players performed very well off the tee, so we're going to need people that perform well off the tee, and not necessarily bombers. But if you're not bombing it, then you better be able to find the fairway. So strokes gained off the tee is the first component of our model. Second is strokes gained approach. So really, we're targeting ball strikers. It's probably more similar to what our model should have looked like last week, I would say. We're not as concerned about how far you hit it, but we need you to hit it well, and we need you to hit it well consistently around this track. The third component is birdies or better gained. The winning score last year was -16, I mentioned Koepka finished at. So yeah, birdies can be had around this track. You want to get your guys to make 4 or 5 birdies around. So we're going to need birdies or better gained. Strokes gained on par 4s correlates pretty heavily to players that have had success here. And that makes sense, right? Because we have the 2 fewer par 5s giving us the 2 extra par 4s, it being a par 70. So you're going to get 2 par 5s, 4 par 3s, and then 12 par 4s, meaning you're playing a couple extra par 4s. So players that play well on the par 4s are something we want to target this week. Fairways gained, we've sprinkled in to give those shorter hitters a little bit more of a boost that might not be captured in strokes gained off the tee. So those guys that can find a lot of fairways, we'll certainly want to take a look at them this week. As well as finally, which is interesting that we have both in the model, birdies or better gained, and bogey avoidance is the last stat we're using in the model, and it actually correlated well to players that have finished well at this event. So not only do you need to be able to make a lot of birdies, another style that can succeed here is that par is a pretty decent score around this golf course. So bogey avoidance, has been sprinkled in. I believe it's 5% of the weight of the model. But we are more concerned with your ability to make birdies around this track. So that's what the model looks like. Really heavily focused on strokes gained off the tee and strokes gained approach. So like most weeks, we're really just looking for great ball strikers here. But unlike most weeks, we really don't have much of a length component to our model this week. So we're just going to find folks that, like I mentioned, hit the ball well, and do that consistently time and time again. So we actually only have 16 players that I'm going to tout this week in the player pool of a 78 player event. So I'm giving you about 20% of the field that I'm looking at playing. And for you guys that are playing, just 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 lineup in the Millionaire Maker, I think that's about a perfect number for you guys. If you're going to play a lot of lineups, certainly expand your player pool outside of the players I give you. 16 players for 150 lineups is much too small a pool. So if you're ramping up your lineup entries, hopefully you've made some profits to be able to do that over the last few weeks by watching the pod. You definitely want to have a player pool outside of this. So find some players that you like outside of my touts, or feel free to, DM me on Twitter, hit me up on Instagram. If you know me personally, shoot me a text. Find out what other players you might want to expand your player pool outside of if you're entering more lineups. But if you're entering about 5 lineups, 16 players should be enough for you to choose from. So with that, we will get into our top shelf plays here. And the first top shelf play is Rory McIlroy at $11,200, the second most expensive player on the slate. He is projected at 17% ownership. And yeah, McIlroy just lost, that number 1 player in the world ranking after Rahm's victory at Memorial. So I think McIlroy comes back ready to regain that ranking, or at least vying heavily to do so. McIlroy ranks second in the custom model, 19th on approach, and second off the tee over the last 24 measured rounds. Also 9th in birdies or better gained. 6th on strokes gained in the par 4s. He is checking every single box. We know this guy gains off the tee, and he also has the distance to boot. He's actually in the top 50% in fairways gained in this field, and we know the distance Rory has. So that's impressive stuff. That's impressive stuff from Rory. 17% ownership is a little higher than I thought it was going to come in at, but I think it's certainly fair. You guys will have to remember, all of these ownerships are going to be higher than we're accustomed to because we only have 78 players to choose from. And of those 78 players, I think there are, a good number of them, maybe at least 10% of the field at the bottom range there, that really aren't even playable. So we don't have all that many players to choose from. So we're going to see ownerships tick a bit higher than normal. So 17% seems fair to me on Rory. He is an absolute class player, and as the third highest projected owned player on the slate, that seems fair to me. The price seems fair to me. The recent form is fine. So yeah, of the 2 players I like, and there only are 2 top shelf golfers that I'm going to tout this week, of the 2 of them, Rory is one, and I will be firing up plenty of Rory. Won't be difficult to get overweight to the field at 17% projected ownership, and I think it's a good week for Rory. So Rory McIlroy, our first top shelf play at $11,200, 17% projected ownership. Our only other top shelf play this week is Justin Thomas at $10,700, 19.2% projected ownership. And found something interesting about JT. The interesting thing about JT, so let's go ahead and take a look at JT the last time we saw him. And the last time we saw Justin Thomas was at the Memorial. And in his Saturday and Sunday rounds, JT lost 1 stroke on approach on Saturday and 2.2 strokes on approach on Sunday. So, over JT's last 100 measured rounds, he has never lost strokes on approach in 3 consecutive rounds. It hasn't happened. Not only that, but following rounds where he loses strokes on approach, aside from the rounds following rounds where he's lost strokes on approach twice consecutively, he's gained 2.9 strokes on approach in the round following. The last time he did it at the Travelers, so Thursday, Friday at the Travelers, he lost back-to-back, and then the first round of the Workday Charity Open, he gained 2.9 strokes on approach. He lost 1.4 strokes on approach the first round at the Heritage, came back to gain 1.7 in that second round. JT's a guy, when he has these terrible performances on approach, like he did on Sunday at Memorial, losing 2.2 strokes on approach, he bounces back in a big way. And he hasn't lost on approach in 3 consecutive rounds, at least over his last 100 rounds. And I wouldn't be surprised if that goes back even further, if I ran the data back even further. So I love JT to get off to a hot start here on Thursday. I think he has a great Thursday round. Saw he's about 18-1 as a first round leader. In a field this strong, I don't love those odds, but I do think JT gets off to a hot start here, so I might have to place that as well. Really like JT here. The ownership's following. He's the highest projected owned player on the slate at that 19.2% projected ownership. But the ownership's being really spread out here. So being able to match the field on JT at this ownership percentage, particularly given that the only other person we're coming up here and spending for is Rory, shouldn't be too difficult. So Justin Thomas at that $10,700 price tag is someone I will be firing up for sure, even though he has that 19.2% projected ownership. The next player that I like is going to be the first player of our mid-shelf plays. And it's Xander Schauffele. And Schauffele is someone that really hasn't popped in recent events. He hasn't had many great finishes in recent events, and he seems to just be the victim of one awful round in every single event. I was reading a tournament primer by Pat Mayo, someone who I like to read his content, and he called it the Tommy Fleetwood syndrome, which I think is funny. Fleetwood definitely suffers from the same sort of thing where, man, it's just one round, these spotty rounds where Xander is terrible. And then every other round, he's, a top-notch ball striker against the field. So if we can get 4 rounds, if Xander can put 4 rounds together of solid golf, he's going to be in contention to win this event. The ownership is up there at 15.7%, making him the 6th highest projected owned player in this field. But man, Xander's been hitting the ball extremely well, rating 5th in our custom model. He's 27th on approach, 7th off the tee, 11th in birdies or better gained, and 7th on the par 4s over the last 24 measured rounds. He loves these, small field, highly competitive, no-cut events. As a winner of the Tour Championship, he's shown that. So I really, really like Xander. A player like JT, that the ownership is up there, him being one of the top owned players in this event, but the ownership's so spread out that it shouldn't be that difficult for us to get even to the field on Xander. And I do like this $9,000 range a ton this week, but Xander being really up at 9,800, almost in that $10,000 range. Look, we're fading Webb, we're fading Cantlay, we're fading Bryson, we're fading Rahm, so getting at least even to the field on McIlroy, JT, and Xander shouldn't be that difficult for us to do, and getting overweight to the field would be ideal. So certainly like Xander this week at $9,800, fire him up at will. And I mentioned that I'm going to like a lot in this $9,000 range, and the next player I like is Daniel Berger at $9,600, 14.9% projected ownership. Berger's won this event in the past twice before, so he clearly likes this track. He's rating 4th in our custom model, 8th on approach, 5th in birdies or better gained, 3rd on the par 4s. So yeah, Berger's checking every box here, including the course history, as I mentioned, with the 2 previous wins here. And what's pretty surprising is the ownership on Berger. I mentioned 14.9%. I thought he would be potentially the highest owned player on the slate. But he's checking in at moderate ownership, I would say. And it's because of this peanut butter spread that everyone's doing. There's so many great golfers in this event and so many directions you can go that it seems like, there isn't one stand being made. This is going to be another week. I will drop another ownership article late this week. Make sure to look out for that, because this is going to be another week that's going to be very important to monitor ownership, because this is a week that's very easy to go ahead and pivot to some other players. If anyone starts to get too chalky and starts to become too popular, let's definitely pivot this week because there are so many great players in the field this week that we can pivot to. But Berger at $9,600, 14.9% seems low. I think he should have been, one of the highest owned players on the slate. So we will definitely at least match the field on Berger. We will try to get overweight to him as well. This whole $9,000 range, we're going to be targeting heavily. It's where most of our ownership's going to lie. We'll see what that does for the build strategy. I think really ideally we can grab 2 or even 3 of these guys in the $9,000 range and then either drop into the low 7,000s where we like a lot of players, or maybe grab one player in the $8,000 range, and then we might have to tinker with the player or 2 in the $6,000 range. But we have a couple players there that we can feel comfortable with. So hammer in this $9,000 range, guys. That's what we're going to do this week. So far we've got Xander and Berger in this range. I also love Colin Morikawa at $9,500, 14.6% projected ownership. And when I said ball striking, your mind should have gone to Morikawa. The guy's irons are absolutely stellar. Off the tee, he's more than serviceable. So it should come as no surprise that we like Morikawa, and the model likes him too. Comes in 9th in the custom model, 4th on approach, 13th off the tee, 8th in fairways gained. So a guy that we can trust to hit the fairways, even though he might not be the longest guy in the field. And Morikawa's been on a roll lately. So why not go back to the kid? The ownership is in check. Seems really spot on at that 14.6%. Seems about where he should be coming in at. And we have no reason to be afraid of Morikawa. The track should be a fit. I don't believe he's played this event before, being that, he obviously needed the time to qualify for the WGCs. And let me double check that Morikawa has not played this event. And he has not. So yeah, it will be Morikawa's first time at the event, but not concerned about that. He's a phenomenal talent. One of the rising stars that, the PGA Tour has, that I mentioned. The PGA Tour is fucking up by not getting more exposure to their players. I mean, Morikawa is an absolute stud. Someone I'm excited to watch his career moving forward. And yeah, we're going to fire him up this week at will, as we are a lot of these guys in the $9,000 range. And a guy that's, probably forever going to be tied to Morikawa as far as his name goes, is the next guy we like. It's Viktor Hovland at $9,400, 16.8% projected ownership. This ownership also feels about right. Thought maybe Hovland would come in as a top 5, maybe even top 3 owned player, so maybe a little under-owned in my opinion. And that's because Hovland has been the world's premier ball striker since the PGA Tour's returned. Hovland rating 1st in our custom model. He's 1st on approach, 10th off the tee, 7th in birdies or better gained, 16th on the par 4s over the last 24 measured rounds. Fire this guy up at will. He's 25-1 in the betting market. I thought we'd get maybe a better number on him, but still at 25-1, I like it to win this event. Hovland, if he can get the putting and around the green to similar to what we needed from Homa in turning that around last week to get that T3 finish, if Hovland does that, he's going to win this damn thing. So really, really like Hovland at $9,400. The price tag's too cheap. And even with the price tag being too cheap, the ownership still came in check and even a little under-owned in my opinion. So love Viktor Hovland at $9,400. And I'll echo it again, this $9,000 range, guys. Grab as many players in this range as you can, because this is, I think, where the money's going to be made this week. We will skip over Dustin Johnson, though, in this $9,000 range. He seems broken right now. We'll wait for him to show some form and kind of prove it before we go back to DJ. But we will take a flyer on the guy priced right below him. Brooks Koepka, $9,200, 7.2% projected ownership is really what has me intrigued. Brooks was trending in the right direction, and now he seems to have stalled a little bit. So the game's in a better place than it was, a few months back when he was still dealing with that nagging injury, the lingering injury. But, oh man, it seems like if he can just make one more stride forward, then we are getting a bargain on Brooks. Not only from a pricing standpoint, but also from an ownership standpoint. That first round at the 3M, he gained 2.5 strokes on approach, gained 1.6 off the tee. Looked like he was, he had an awful day putting. So it looks like the ball striking's turning around. He did lose 0.7 strokes on approach in that Friday round, but gained another 1.8 off the tee. It seems like Brooks is close, and I'd rather be too early than too late. And this ownership at 7.2% is a gift. I mean, for the defending champion, so clearly a guy who likes this golf course. Yeah, I'll be firing up lots of Brooks this week. This $9,000 range, it is going to eat up essentially all of my ownership. Between these five guys, Xander, Berger, Morikawa, Hovland, Koepka, they're five of my, top 8 plays on the slate, I would say. They are some of my favorite plays on the slate, so I will be firing them up at will, and I think you should too. And since we are firing up the $9,000 range so much, it means we don't have much in the $8,000 range we can play. If you do find yourself needing someone in that range, Abraham Answer at $8,400, 15.5% projected ownership though, feels a bit high to me. And I'll tell you why. Answer, although he rates out great in the custom model, I mean, he's coming in 8th in the custom model. He's 23rd on approach, 15th off the tee, 28th in birdies or better gained, 10th on the par 4s. So he's checking every box, particularly at this price tag. And at face value, it looks like the price tag's too cheap. But man, if you look at this recent form, it's pretty concerning. He's lost strokes on approach in 4 of his last 5 measured rounds, and it's not like he's been very close. Sunday at Travelers, lost 1.9 strokes on approach. At Memorial, he lost 2.6 on Thursday and 3.7 on Friday. That is god-awful. That's 6.3 strokes lost on approach on Thursday and Friday. Somehow was able to make the cut still, buoyed by a phenomenal short game. But then lost another 2.4 strokes on approach on Sunday. He did gain 1.2 strokes on approach on Saturday at Memorial, but that's the only round where he's gained on approach in his last 5, and the other 4 have been awful. The model loves him, but that's really being carried by that unbelievable performance that we saw him have at Heritage, where he was gaining strokes on approach like it was going out of style. But I am concerned with the current state of Answer's game. I have to mention him because the model loves him so much, and I don't have all that much that I like in this $8,000 range. So if you do get stuck here, I think Answer's a good player to look to. But if you're concerned like I am about the recent form, and I am concerned, I will own sprinkles of Answer, but I'll be underweight to the field. I think the just north of 15% projected ownership on Answer's too high. And I am concerned with these approach numbers. So Abraham Answer at $8,400, buyer beware, but if you need someone in this price range, I think stuffing in Answer is the call. The only other player I like in the $8,000 range, all the way down at $8,000 flat, is Sergio Garcia at 11.4% projected ownership. Sergio, a guy that's likely going to gain ball striking, particularly off the tee. So with us weighting heavily strokes gained off the tee this week, I like Sergio. And look, Sergio is going to be a volatile play, but he is one of those guys that I do like. We're guaranteed 4 rounds from him. It should keep him more focused and interested in the event, even if he doesn't get off to a hot start, which Sergio can be a volatile player. So I like that we're going to get 4 rounds guaranteed from Sergio. And he rates out well in the model for this price tag. He's coming in 20th, 5th off the tee, 43rd on approach, but as I mentioned, he's a spotty approach player, not unlike Xander in that it's usually 1 round that gets Sergio. He has 1 awful round, and the rest he's one of the better ball strikers. So if we can get Sergio to put together 4 rounds like Xander, I really like his prospects this week. So Sergio Garcia, $8,000 flat. The ownership's fair at 11.4%. So we'll be able to at least match the field on Sergio at that 11.4% projected ownership. The last player I like in the mid-shelf plays, and yeah, there are only 8 mid-shelf plays, guys. Again, only 16 players that I'm touting this week that I'm telling you to go ahead and add to your player pools. Again, if you're playing a ton of lineups, certainly expand past this. But I love him this week, and the ownership shocks me. And he burned us badly last time, but it's Paul Casey, at $7,800. And I'm sure some of you guys like wanted to throw up when I said that name based on how heavily I touted Casey and how much he disappointed us at Memorial. But 10.7% is too low for this price tag, which is way too cheap. It is way too cheap. So Casey at the Memorial, as a matter of fact, let's take a look at how Paul Casey went ahead and missed his cut at Memorial. So Casey lost 6 strokes putting in 2 rounds. 6 strokes putting, which is phenomenal, unbelievable. Or I'm sorry, that was at the 3M. At the 3M, I said Memorial. At the 3M, Casey lost 6 strokes putting. 6 strokes putting. Gained on approach in both rounds on Thursday and Friday. He gained 1.6 off the tee on Thursday. Lost half a stroke off the tee on Friday. But Casey, a great player off the tee. That's only his 3rd round losing off the tee over his last around 15 or so. So we don't have to worry about Casey off the tee. The approach was good. People just got burned. He was high owned and he missed the cut with a terrible putting performance at the 3M, but great opportunity to hop back on the bandwagon. Casey might be my highest owned player this week if this 10.7% projected ownership doesn't move north at all. He's too cheap. He's under-owned. Fire him up at will, and fire him up a lot. I'm going to own a scary amount of Paul Casey this week. So with that, we're going to finish this puppy, and we're going to get into our swag bag plays, which we have 6 swag bag plays for you, and guys that we feel pretty good about. So we want to roster these guys above the field because we are keeping our player pool so tight. I feel pretty good about these swag bag plays this week. So we have some quality players down here this week. Given that it's a WGC, an invitational, where, the cream of the crop are coming. The first swag bag play, down at $7,300, Scottie Scheffler. 7.7% projected ownership has me even more intrigued. Scheffler is a pretty volatile player, but a very high-class player. One of these players that, as a newcomer to the PGA Tour, I think eventually his name starts to be more associated with the Wolffs, Morikawas, Hovlands, because he is a very talented player. He just doesn't quite have the consistency that those other players I just mentioned have been able to gain quite yet. And Wolff really doesn't have that consistency either. It's really just Morikawa and Hovland that are already incredibly consistent players. But I would say Scheffler's similar to a Matthew Wolff in that he has incredibly high upside. He's an incredibly talented player. And, he's just volatile right now. Hasn't figured out that consistency. He ranks 22nd in our custom model. He's 12th off the tee, 21st in birdies or better gained. He's 43rd in the par 4s, so not great there. And 50th on approach, not great there either. But down here in this pricing range, and as I mentioned, a guy that's volatile, if we can catch Scheffler in, on a good week, he's a guy that can contend, as a matter of fact, and he's a guy that can top 5. He's a guy that has high upside based on his talent. So I like sprinkling in some Scheffler at that projected ownership percentage, just north of 7%. It's not going to be hard to get overweight to the field on him without having to take a giant stand on him. So while I might not take a huge stand on Scheffler, I'll certainly be overweight to the field on him this week. $7,300, fair price tag. The ownership feels low. So Scottie Scheffler at $7,300 is the first swag bag play. The second swag bag play is Corey Connors at $7,300 as well. He has 13.4% projected ownership, so I'll more likely get to match the field on Connors, and I'll take some of the ownership I would use to get overweight to the field on Connors to get overweight to the field on Scheffler instead. Connors is rating 21st in our custom model. He's 12th on approach, 24th off the tee. He's 58th in birdies or better gain, and that's just because, Connors is a great ball striker. The Kent State alum hits the shit out of the ball. The guy can't putt for anything. Like, the guy is a fucking terrible putter. So it is what it is. But if he can find a good week on these greens, Corey Connors is a guy that's going to pay off his DraftKings salary. He's a guy you don't have to worry about the ball striking from. He's going to gain almost every single round in both off the tee and approach. His tee to green game is just phenomenal. So Corey Connors, a guy we can trust this week. I don't believe he's played this event before, was my one concern with Connors. No, he has. It was Scheffler. Scheffler has not played the event before. So that was my one concern with Scheffler. He hasn't played the event before. But again, with these guys, these PGA Tour pros, I don't like to weigh that too heavily. It's not necessarily, it's more of a tiebreaker than anything else. So if I were liking, say, an Ian Poulter this week at $7,400, and I liked him equally to Scheffler, then I would lean to Poulter based on the fact that he's played this event before and has some good course history. But given that I just like Scheffler, I'm not going to let the fact that he hasn't played this event before shy me away from him. Connors did play this event last year, came T27, gained 1.02 strokes total against the field. So yeah, a decent performance. So Corey Connors, $7,300. We'll try and get even weight to the field on the former Kent Stater. The next SCHWAG bag play, and yes, he's back, having qualified for this event for the second year in a row. It's Max Homa at $7,200, and nothing's changed. Homa's still striking the ball phenomenally. If he putts well, he'll have a good finish this week. He'll pay off this DraftKings salary easily. I expected the ownership to tick up a little bit more after he finally had a good showing based on the ball striking, but for some reason it's still down. 10.6% is too low, so we're firing up tons of Homa again. Let's see if he can pay us off 2 weeks in a row, and hopefully we get the pieces around him right this week. So I shouldn't have to explain, but let me give you Homa as far as the model goes. He's rating 14th. He's 5th on approach, 25th off the tee. 36th in birdies or better gained, and 11th on the par fours. Down here in this pricing range, a phenomenal value. Under-owned. Fire up Homa. The next SCHWAG bag play, and it's interesting, he's down here in the SCHWAG bag, because it's not often that you get to mention Bubba Watson in the SCHWAG bag. It's $7,100. And it's too cheap for Bubba. 10.1% projected ownership. The ownership's too low on Bubba. A guy that has finished second at this event before. Bubba's someone who, if he likes a golf course, he likes a golf course. And if he doesn't like a golf course, he doesn't like the golf course. So the fact that he's shown upside here is extremely encouraging for me. Aside from the fact that he's shown upside here, also encouraging to me is just exactly how Bubba Watson missed the cut last week at the 3M. He gained on approach and off the tee both Thursday and Friday. It was just, he couldn't make a putt and was bad around the green. So he gained 1.4 strokes on approach and 2 strokes off the tee across those 2 rounds at 3M, gaining in both of those rounds individually. So the ball striking's there. It wasn't that Bubba wasn't hitting the ball well. It's, maybe that golf course isn't as good of a fit for him. Or maybe he just had a bad week on the greens and a bad week around the greens, which, he's shown upside around, at this event. So I love Bubba this week. I mentioned, 5 of my favorite 8 plays are in the $9,000 range. One of my favorite plays is Bubba Watson at $7,100. He's one of those other 3 players that I absolutely love this week, along with Casey, and one more player who we'll get down to, actually, our cheapest player that we'll tout this week would be the other 3 players that would round out my top 8 favorite plays this week. But I absolutely love Bubba Watson this week at $7,100. Get well over the field on him. We're taking a stand on Bubba. He can win this event. He's love these high upside spots where you can get Bubba low owned. So Bubba Watson, $7,100. Own plenty of them this week, folks. The next SCHWAG bag play is a guy that's just been hitting the ball so well. It's crazy to see him priced, next to near Bubba Watson, but it's $6,900. Kevin Streelman, and Streelman's projected for 10.1% projected for 10.1% ownership as well. Same ownership projection as Bubba, and only $200 cheaper. Just reinforcing how much I love Bubba. But Streelman in his own right, the model likes him. So Streelman rates out 10th. He's 20th on approach, 18th off the tee, 16th in birdies or better gained, 68th on the par fours would be the one mark where he doesn't score so well. And we were surprised that, or I'm sorry, he's 20th on the par fours, 20th on the par fours. So he is checking every box. And we were surprised, remember, that Streelman scores so well on par fives as well. So even though it's not rated in our model, being that he's not a long hitter, he's a guy that can go out there and get birdies on these par fives. So Kevin Streelman at $6,900, rating 10th in our model. Yeah, absolutely. We're going to be firing up plenty of them. While I don't like him as much as I like Bubba for $200 more. And if you have the extra $200, I think you should bump up to Bubba. Really do love Streelman at $6,900. We'll be owning plenty of him this week. We'll be well overweight to the field. As far as his course history goes, Streelman is playing this event for the first time, but again, the model likes him so much, I'm not going to let that take me off of him, and I don't think that you should either. So Streelman at $6,900 is the second to last swag bag play, and the last swag bag play, who is, again, one of my favorite 8 plays on this slate. One of my favorite plays on this slate, especially the ownership and the price. It's Shane Lowry at $6,600. 5.1% projected ownership. And look, like Shane Lowry is a class player, like a world-class golfer to be down in this pricing range. To be fair, he ranks 53rd in the custom model, only 37th on approach, 39th off the tee, 75th in birdies or better gains. So this guy cannot get a putt to drop. And 65th on the par fours, which I imagine is likely the same story. He cannot get a putt to drop. But let's dig a little bit deeper and see what Shane Lowry's been doing recently. And at the Memorial, where we last saw him, he missed the cut, but gained on approach and off the tee in both of those rounds. Gained 1.6 on approach and 0.3 off the tee in his first round, and gained 0.9 strokes on approach and 0.9 off the tee in his second round. We just need him to turn around the short game, and this could be the week. And we're getting him at such low ownership and such a dirt cheap price that it doesn't even cost us much to be able to get over the field on him. So you can get really unique with your builds by including Lowry. It allows you to get one of those guys up in that top shelf range. Love Shane Lowry this week. I'll be taking a large stand on him. If you're someone that likes to take on risk, then follow me on that. Because of these players down in this range, he's really the only guy, below Streelman at 6,900 that I really think is viable, that I feel comfortable rostering, and he's only coming in 5.1% owned. So for builds that I have to grab someone down here, they will all be Shane Lowry. So let's go Shane this week. And that rounds out the swag bag. This stuff is awesome. So shouts out to White Cloudz for a phenomenal product. I'm going to have to finish this off air because this thing was great. And, we had to shorten up the video this week, unfortunately, so I didn't get to make it through the entire joint. But trust me, guys, I'll be finishing this up. I'll make sure I drop an ownership article for you guys before we lock. So make sure right before lock, if you're awake, go ahead and check the website, htgpod.com. I'll be dropping an ownership update. You'll definitely want to check that out. Might do a player article. Maybe I'll do my top 8 players. Stay tuned for that. Pay attention to the Instagram. I might drop a top 8 players article going more into depth into those 8 players that I said I really liked. But other than that, another week, guys. Let's go ahead and get some money. Please, if you don't already, follow me on Instagram, follow me on Twitter. Really like if you like the YouTube videos, shoot some recommendations in the comments for ways I can improve. And let's go out here and get this money. One of these weeks, I swear it's going to come soon. We're going to have a big winner. It's going to be one of these weeks soon, so stick with me, guys. Appreciate you guys continuing to follow along, and I'll see you next week. Peace.